A wise man once said, I have no idea who the wise man is, that if you concentrate on too many OKRs, you really have no OKRs. Do you think there's a right number to have?
Absolutely. If you focus on everything, you focus on nothing.
That was a better quote than my made up one.
Yeah, I'd say 2 to 3, especially for companies that are just starting out with this type of planning.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Welcome back to the show. Today's episode is with Alyssa Shadinger, the CFO of Sisense. And this is a masterful deep dive on building and scaling analytics teams. We talk about who data and analytics should report into. Should it start on the engineering side to build out the infra and then transfer over to finance or ops as it becomes more about reporting? Is there an argument that data engineering should sit in the engineering org or report into an engineering leader? How to delineate between the systems management versus, the actual data work and how that changes over time with the systems, making sure you don't rack up those costs. Business partnering versus self-serve. How much of it should be people can go in and pull their own reports, come to their own insights versus you give it to them in a known format where you can control the output. And then we go deep into setting OKRs. Setting the OKRs is easy. It happens to be cascading them down. That is a bit harder. We talk about the rub when it comes to getting OKRs right and how finance can play a leadership role in helping the rest of the org set them. All this and much, much more after a short word from our sponsors. Ready to take your company global? Mr. Worldwide! You'll expand your business into new countries, hire international team members, run multi-currency payroll, pay local benefits, and stay on the straight and narrow with tax compliance. Sounds like easy stuff, right? As businesses grow beyond their borders, they face a maze of regulations and logistical challenges. RemoFirst clears the path as your trusted global employer of record, enabling you to hire in over 180 countries without setting up local entities. They manage international payroll, tax compliance, and HR benefits while ensuring adherence to local employment laws in every country. Whether you're looking to make your first international hire or streamline existing global operations, RemoFirst makes global employment simple with their employer of record EOR service starting at $199 a month, an average of 50% less than other providers. I've seen companies grow their operations in 20 countries with RemoFirst help. You can get 2 months free on EOR fees for your first hire in any country by visiting remofirst.com/metrics. That's REMOFIRST.com/metrics. Discover how easy international hiring can be at remofirst.com/metrics. Just go to remofirst.com/metrics. As a startup CFO, the number one question my friends come to me with is, who do you use for banking? That's right, they don't ask me for my chicken parm recipe and they don't ask me where I got my dog groomed. I'm the friend they come to for invoicing, credit card, and bank account advice. Go figure. So I thought I'd just come out and answer it for everybody on the podcast. I recently made the switch to Mercury because I was losing my mind trying to get a clear understanding of how cash entered and left the building. Financial operations were getting needlessly complex, and that's coming from someone who does finance stuff for a living. You can't manage what you can't measure, so I made the change. Plus, it took me literally under 10 minutes to go from application to approval. I'm not kidding. It was wild. Mercury simplifies your financial operations with powerful banking, and it gives you greater control, precision, and speed so you can operate at your best. Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided by the Choice Financial Group and Evolve Banking Trust. Members FDIC. Alyssa, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, CJ. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
You told me you were really excited to talk about annual planning for an hour and a half, right?
Oh, no. It's the bane of my existence right now.
Me too. All right. So we'll make a pact to not talk about annual planning for this podcast. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
So you're the CFO at Sisense. I love the company's journey. Congrats on all the success so far. And I feel like you're well positioned to speak from your day-to-day and what the company does just about BI and analytics. So I want to jump into that. And the first question that I get from people when they ask me about setting up a team is, who should data and analytics report into?
Yeah, so I think like any problem that's worth solving, the answer is kind of, it depends. But I do think there's certain considerations and basically a framework you can use to figure out where it should sit and make sense within your organization. Some of the things I like to think about are, one, who has the skill set? If you're just building out a new function, which one of your executives either maybe has some experience in data analytics and whether that's on the analytical side or the data engineering side, or also which executive has capacity to spearhead a new initiative, because it can be quite time consuming building out a new team. So that's one consideration. And then I'd also consider the size and stage of the company. So Sisense has been around for about 15 years. We are a modern analytics platform. We started off as a BI company 15 years ago and now have evolved. So now most of our customers are using Sisense to build rich data analytics and BI experiences into their products for their end users. So we're kind of now more part of the supply chain. So BI has certainly internally at Sisense has also evolved over those 15 years. So right now we have a data engineering team that sits under our engineering organization, reports up to our SVP of engineering. And then we have data analytics, which today sits in finance. It used to sit under our chief operating officer. We no longer have a chief operating officer. So we felt like that made the most sense for it to move over into finance. And I do have a data analytics background. And our CEO recently asked, hey, does it make sense to keep these two teams separate, or should we think about bringing them together? And honestly, the answer from both myself and the head of engineering was, it's working. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But we also have thought about, maybe eventually as the company continues to scale, it may make sense for those data analysts to eventually leave finance and go sit within the respective orgs. But today we're just not big enough. We have more of like a shared service where one analyst is supporting multiple teams. But if we get to the point where each team has their own analyst, that's another model that can make a lot of sense.
I think the way that you have it set up is what other companies are either striving to do or are already doing. And I wanted to ask if is the setup more due to the type of data that they're handling, or is it due to their capabilities and skill sets? Like one is more of an engineering type focus and they're setting up the infrastructure, and the other is more analytical with takeaways.
Yeah, so that's actually a great question, because it definitely depends on how your company is structured. So Sisense, we're a B2B enterprise SaaS company. So we have tons of data in Salesforce. We have tons of data from our product telemetry, which is in most companies going to be more of a proprietary setup. It's probably not going to be nice and packaged into one system. We also have lots of things feeding into Salesforce, NetSuite for our financial reporting, HR systems. So it's a more complex setup where the data engineering team is basically bringing all of that data into the data lake. And then through all of the ETL process, they then transform all of that raw data into usable tables. We'd refer to that as the kind of the semantic layer, where we're defining different terms that the entire company is going to then be able to go into these tables on the front end in Sisense in a much more user-friendly capacity and actually understand the data that they're pulling. So then the data analysts are responsible within the Sisense tool itself, setting up those data models that they're pulling from the data warehouse that the engineering team has set up and structured in a way that's easy to use and understand. And then our analysts are going and building those data models, building out dashboards and automations for the teams that they service, and then also training certain folks from those teams to be able to self-service ad hoc requests from those data models.
I love how you touched on, Alyssa, the different types of data, because it didn't occur to me to bucket in this fashion. And it seems obvious looking back, but we'd spoken to Shruti Lanka, the CFO of Public.com, which is a platform for trading different financial assets. And she said that, we centralized our BI team under finance and in one area more for the data integrity, because we have three types of data that we look at day to day. We have financial data, we have sales data, and then we have the production data. And for them, the production data was just at a scale that like my mind couldn't comprehend because of all the transactions. But I imagine that you have considerations with the different types of data that you can marry together to create more strategic insights for the business. But the next question I wanted to ask you here is, do you think, though, at the very beginning of a company that BI should start as an engineering function just because you have to have someone who can code to build out the infrastructure and data pipelines before like you even have that option? If you want to break it out into finance and operations as it becomes more about reporting?
Not necessarily. And going back to what I was saying about how complex is the company's structure and the data that you're using. A previous company that I worked for was much more straightforward because instead of, B2B enterprise SaaS, we were almost 100% product-led growth. So customers landed on our website, signed up with a credit card. We didn't even have Salesforce when I joined the company. We did eventually implement Salesforce. But so in that company, we only had one BI analyst that sat on the finance team because it was a much more simple setup where he had the skill set to be able to just pull data from our product data from our system. So we called it admin, was basically like the back panel to our operational.
We have that too. Yeah. I think everyone has an admin.
Like back panel to our operational, basically ran our entire product and all the software. We were a cloud infrastructure company. So he was able to pull that data, that raw data, and then, NetSuite data. We had very few systems that we were marrying together. So he was able to own that model. Now that is probably a little bit unique. And in most companies, I would say it probably makes sense to start in engineering, especially if you're more complex and you have, many different systems with disparate data sources.
Well, it also sounded like you benefited from kind of like a backyard that was already relatively clean. I think a lot of companies out there are like, holy shit, this is a mess. Like, how do I even start here?
Yeah.
How do you delineate between systems management versus the actual data work? Because those are two kind of groupings of stuff that needs to get done. And people, I think, have a hard time breaking it up. Like, do you do it by that person only does this bucket and that person does that bucket? Or is it kind of like a confluence where people are putting their hands in and just pulling things out?
So we have the team structured today on the data side. And within data engineering, we have one person who's responsible for the data lake. So he's responsible for, maintaining all of the connectors to all of our different data sources and maintaining the data lake. Then we have two BI engineers who are responsible for that semantic layer. So defining all of the fields and titles and vocabulary across the company for our data, and also structuring the tables in a way that makes sense and relates the data in a way. They have a little bit more of a business context. So although they're not part of the shared service analyst group, they do have more of that business understanding, and they're staying really close to the analysts to understand how should all of this data be related to each other. And then we have the analysts separate. So we have kind of split up those different roles and responsibilities. And then I would say on more of like a systems maintenance side, we do have a business systems team that sits under sales operations. So they'd be more responsible for like your ongoing maintenance of Salesforce. And they do also have to communicate with the data team. If we're doing like an overhaul and creating new fields, they're responsible for kind of communicating that to the data team and making sure it gets picked up into the data lake.
And then in the background of this, a lot of companies also have a Salesforce admin. I don't know if that's the case where you've worked.
Yeah, that Salesforce admin sits in that business systems team.
I like how you define the semantic layer, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it feels like there's like that's kind of the delineation between the front door and the back door. It's kind of like the front of the house. How do you make it real to people and talk about business outcomes and link it directly to what they're working on day to day? And then the back is like, you don't really need to know how the sausage is made. It's more technical than probably people care to understand.
Exactly.
Do you think there's like a certain hiring cadence that's better? Like, would it be wrong to go out and hire a data scientist off the bat? Like, is that too heavy hitting, or maybe like the systems wouldn't be set up for them? How did you go about building out the team?
Yeah, so that's actually something that we did that we kind of had to reconfigure. So we did bring in a data scientist about a year ago, and we found that we were kind of trying to run before we could walk.
So
and
well
we weren't
said.
Like we weren't quite ready for that skill set. So what we've done in the interim is we've changed that person's roles and responsibilities to focus on being an analyst for our go-to-market teams. And it's great because this person's like extremely well-versed in data and can also on the side do some of the more complex projects. So right now they're actually working on building out a predictive model to help us predict churn and basically build out that predictive churn model and then use that to empower our customer success organization to be able to identify at-risk customers more quickly and then come up with a remediation plan.
It's funny. I've interviewed a couple CFOs over the past couple of weeks, and I think 3 so far have brought up using BI teams to target customers who maybe have the potential to churn.
Yeah.
That seems like a really good use of time.
Yeah, I think it's a hot topic right now. Everybody's super focused on, net retention, gross retention.
That and you also think about helping the sales team target better leads, because someone once said to me, the most expensive thing you can do is send a sales rep down a dark alley, basically wasting their time. And so if you can serve them up every day, the hottest leads with the highest intent, like that's amazing.
Yeah. So that's something we haven't started tackling internally yet, but I know our business development team uses I believe it's called Rev AI. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with it at all, but I think that's basically the idea is they're able to put in like our ideal customer profile. And then this tool helps them find leads that are most aligned with that ICP.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. Bull market, bear market, rates will rise, rates will fall. Can someone please just invent a crystal ball already? Until then, over 40,000 businesses have future-proofed their companies with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. Whether you're closing the books in days, not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. If you listen to this podcast, you'll know I ask CFOs all the time to rep their tech stacks, and I would say almost every one of them use NetSuite. And that's what I would use too. Whether you're a company earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/metrics. The guide is free to you. That is netsuite.com/metrics. Ooh, yeah, it's netsuite.com/metrics. Please, guys, I really need this. Being an operator is not for the faint of heart. It often feels like you're jumping out of an airplane and building the parachute on your way down. CEOs, CFOs, COOs, and BizOps leaders feel my pain. That's why I joined Operators Guild. It's home to more than 1,000 of the most elite, high-growth operators in the world. Think the Special Forces for business scale. Members have access to over 150 in-person events across all 25 global chapters. The modern startup founder, CFO, and COO are really just multidisciplinary problem solvers, which is why having the best problem solvers together has created the ultimate diversity intelligence of any operator group in the world. Operators Guild gave me the chance to meet my own personal board of directors, people I can bounce ideas off of, and their online forum allows you to get answers from your peers as questions pop up. Like, how do I run an employee secondary? Or what should I pay as a base commission rate on SaaS deals? I've made great friends through attending their highly acclaimed OG Summit, and frequently attend their online masterclasses taught by the best tech operators in the business. Join Operators Guild and access the Navy SEALs of high-growth business scaling, a group built by operators for operators. Learn more and apply at operators-guild.com. That's operators-guild.com, and tell them CJ sent you. They'll hook you up. Annual planning season is upon us. That's right, my favorite time of year. And it's not just about setting goals for the coming year. It's about ensuring you have the right tools in place to measure and achieve those goals. As a SaaS CFO, I know having access to reliable, real-time metrics is crucial for my annual planning process. That's why I'm so excited to partner with today's sponsor, Maxio. Maxio is a billing and financial operations platform that helps subscription businesses reconcile bookings, billings, GAAP revenue, and SaaS metrics automatically. By the way, guys, bookings, billings, GAAP revenue, not the same thing. Got to get them straight. Because these numbers are the foundation of your financial models, it's important to have quick access and trust that they are correct. Don't let the complexities of SaaS finance and accounting slow you down. If you want to start 2025 with the right tools, check out Maxio by visiting maxio.com/run the numbers. That's maxio.com/run the numbers. Request a demo through our link to support the podcast, ya boy, and receive a 10% discount on your first year with Maxio. That's maxio.com/run the numbers. maxio.com/run the numbers. Please, guys, I really need this. Alyssa, something you had mentioned before is the concept of business partnering. Can you explain how you think about business partnering? And then also, how do you think about self-service? Because sometimes that can actually be dangerous if you let people overly self-serve.
Yeah, so I think when I think about business partnering, I have a background in consulting. I started my career in consulting. So I like to instill in all of my teams a customer and client service mentality. Although within companies, within most companies, finance is a cost center, not a revenue center, but it's we are serving internal customers. So definitely like to approach it from kind of that consulting background of we're here to help. We're here to basically listen and provide feedback and educate. And I think that's just really important to be able to build those relationships internally, because your CRO may be coming to you and asking for one thing, and you have to be able to ask the questions to get to the crux of why they're asking for this thing, because you as the data expert, you may have a better way to solve that problem, and then that's how I think you can be most effective.
It's kind of what Henry Ford said. If I listened to them, they wouldn't have got cars. They would have got faster horses. It's how do you listen to what they're describing as the problem and then actually figuring out what you're solving for there.
Yeah.
And then the self-service piece, do you try to empower your leaders to be able to go and pull the data themselves? Because what can be dangerous is they go and create their own skunkworks report, and then everybody shows up to the meeting and they're like, oh no, I took the data from, the BI dashboard. But then everybody has different data sets, and then you kind of lose the room. How do you navigate around that?
Yeah, so that is something that we experienced in the past, and what we've realized was that our data models within the Sisense platform were too complex. So Sisense has a cool feature where you can actually see a visualization of your data model. So the team showed me, they're like, yeah, look at this data model. It's cobbling together 36 different tables. So what we realized was, okay, we need to go back and for each department, rebuild, we call them data marts. So basically rebuild the data marts in a much more simple way. So now we've gone and recreated all of our data models. So it's only, maximum it's maybe relating 5 tables, but on average it's only 3. So it's much easier for the customer to then understand what they're pulling and make sure it's coming and also by having all of those defined vocabulary, that also helps kind of alleviate that. I don't think there's a perfect solution. I think you do want your BI tool to be the source of truth. And I think those are some of the ways where you can, mitigate the risk that folks will pull things that it would be misleading.
So if I play it back, you give them a rope to run with, but it's maybe a shorter leash than it was before.
Yep.
Yeah. I've just had so many of those experiences where I think I'm empowering somebody, and then we show up at a meeting and we're having this debate over what the definition of a term is, or the pipeline you pulled for this period is 2x what I pulled for it. And then at that point, it's all right, this meeting probably isn't going to be very productive.
Yeah. I think we've all been there.
You brought up definitions. Do you think that the BI team should be the source of truth of how something is defined?
I do, but I think in collaboration with the rest of the department.
Yeah.
So for example, it's like silly. It's like you would think, ARR or committed ARR means the same thing, but then we were finding certain teams were pulling different, we have like ACV and Salesforce, and not everybody understood what these different fields meant. So now having those defined and having everyone on the same page, I think it just goes a long way. But I do think the data team has to own that.
I empathize with you. Like even the definition of what a customer is, you would think that is the most straightforward thing in the world, and it's really not. How do you think about aligning business partners? Do you put one person towards like the sales group and you're the sales expert? Do you put one person towards the R&D group and that's what you wake up and live and breathe every day? Or do you kind of lose the forest through the trees if that partner doesn't have kind of like the visibility across all the data?
We do map analysts to different teams today, but then they're still sitting within the same team. So we use Slack as our communication tool, and there's always collaboration between our three analysts kind of asking each other like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Does anybody have a different idea? But the way we have it mapped today, we do have one person who supports R&D, and then we have one person who supports sales and marketing. And then we have one person who supports customer success and customer support. And the way we thought about that is like, even though success and support at our company don't sit under the same umbrella, the same leadership, it kind of makes sense from that like customer experience lens for that analyst to be working with those two teams. And then I think sales and marketing also go really nicely together. You're kind of focused on more the outbound and sales motion.
Yeah, totally. And I've heard of FP&A teams being designed very similarly from that business partnering approach. I go back and forth in my own mind because it's like breadth versus depth. Do you want someone who's an absolute expert and can go super deep and talk the talk, like as deep as, like, say, the CMO when it comes to marketing ops and pipeline? But then do you possibly lose the potential benefit or value of they're able to link problems across all the other data sets as well? But it sounds like if the team collaborates in Slack and they're able to share what they're working on, then you don't have to choose between the two.
Yeah, I think it's important to maintain that collaboration and make sure people are talking to each other.
Maybe an odd mechanical question, but I think listeners will benefit from this. Where in the P&L do you think the cost of this group should sit?
I feel like that's another, it depends, but yeah, at Sisense, the data engineering team does actually roll up to R&D, and then everyone who sits under finance rolls up to G&A. I would say it probably makes the most sense to sit in G&A.
Yeah.
We're a little bit of a unique, most of our engineering team sits in Israel, so we don't have the same, unfortunately, we don't have like the same R&D tax credit concerns that a lot of folks would have. But yeah, I could see that being an issue if you're a US based company.
She sniffed it out right there. She knew I was getting at the tax credits. All right, let's transition a bit to talk about OKRs. I think setting OKRs is easy. It's the cascading them down that's a lot harder. Where's the rub when it comes to getting OKRs right, Alyssa?
To be honest, I feel like still figuring this one out, but I would say what I've learned over the last couple of years of implementing OKRs is taking the time to make sure the whole business is bought in. So what I mean by that is in the past, I've seen companies come in, leadership level might say, these are our 2 or 3 OKRs for next year, big goals that we're going to accomplish. But then, we let all of our department leaders go and kind of set their individual targets that are going to help us achieve those big goals. And then companies don't take the time to actually come together and bring all of those department leaders together and understand what are the interdependencies, have we assigned budget dollars to these initiatives and all of those other questions. And I think that's where I've seen companies get into the most trouble is, you get one quarter into the new year and you realize, oh, well, this is my OKR. This is my team's OKR for the year, but now we're stuck because we have a dependency on XYZ team over here and they didn't build it into their plan. So I think it's really important to make it a multi-step process where you're dictating the OKRs, but then you're having those feedback loops and making sure everybody agrees that we can actually accomplish it at the department level.
And just to go a level deeper, are you saying that all the executives should agree those are the OKRs, or all the executives should understand that those are the OKRs and kind of the linkages between them?
Yeah, I think it's that just everyone needs to be bought in, and they need to agree. Like, I forget what the phrase is, but it's like, yeah, you can debate, but once you agree, these are the OKRs, everybody's got to be on board and just like move forward. But then making sure that, if like the deal desk team they have an idea for a new process, but it's going to impact the sales team, that like myself and our deal desk leader, we're going and talking to sales and sales ops and saying, hey, is this okay with you? There's going to be some dependencies on your end. Let's work on this together, instead of just doing it in a vacuum.
Yeah. People will go off and they'll write it down on the slide in their silo, and it makes sense, right? It's very logical. But then when they bring it back, it's like they don't actually link together. And it's like everyone came up with these beautiful OKRs that are not connected at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
How do you think finance plays a role in helping groups come up with OKRs?
I think this should be part of most companies' process as well. I think finance has to be a partner to whoever is leading the OKR initiative to help understand, like, how are we actually going to fund these things for next year. So ideally it should almost coincide with, I know we said we weren't going to talk about annual planning, but should probably coincide with that annual planning cadence, so that, when finance is meeting with all of the budget owners, they kind of have those big goals in mind and talk through, what does that mean? Are we going to do we have to add headcount? Do we need new tools? Help me understand the ROI. And then I think when you can put numbers to the OKRs and explain that ROI, I think that's when you also get more morale and you get folks bought in on why we're doing these things and what it's going to mean for the business.
Alyssa, you brought up ROI. Are you insinuating that all OKRs should have like a material financial impact to the business?
For the most part, yes. I think I'd be hard pressed to find like a top level company OKR that's not going to have a financial impact in one way or another.
Yeah. And I'm being provocative a bit on purpose, because I do think that sometimes people put one or two fluffy OKRs in there just to feel good. I don't know. Have you seen that before?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I feel like I've seen ones around corporate culture that are very vague. And, from my finance point of view, I'm always like, okay, but what's it going to mean in dollars? How many more people are we going to retain? What's that lower turnover going to save us?
Well, I guess the opposite of that question is, should all OKRs have a budget that you can tie back to them?
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to
either a budget or a measurable financial outcome.
Right. And all the OKRs, should they be visible by the entire org, you think, in some sort of reporting structure, like speaking tactically? Like, should everyone in the org be able to go and check how the company's doing?
Yeah, I think so. I think having that transparency is really key. Of course, depends. I'm thinking mostly from like a, startup or growth stage company. So sub 1,000 employees. So, yeah. I mean, does this make sense for Coca-Cola? I'm not 100% sure if they share all their department OKRs with the whole company, but I think for most SMBs, it makes sense to have that transparency.
A wise man once said, I have no idea who the wise man is, that if you concentrate on too many OKRs, you really have no OKRs. Do you think there's a right number to have?
Absolutely. If you focus on everything, you focus on nothing.
That was a better quote than my made up one.
I would say I've heard anywhere from like 2 to 5. Honestly, I think 5 is probably too many. I'd say 2 to 3, especially for companies that are just starting out with this type of planning.
Yeah. Someone actually did once say to me, a CEO, that you should have either 3 or 5 OKRs. 2 is not enough, and 4 is an awkward number. Like, you couldn't come up with one more. But I always thought that was kind of funny, because like Mount Rushmore has 4 people on it, not 3, not 5. But
yeah. And I mean, too, if you're a smaller company, it might be like those are 2 really important things that if we accomplish them next year, we win and we meet our goals. So yeah, I don't think there's any perfect number, but
there's something to be said about focus. I'm actually really glad you said that, because like I've also been in orgs where we just create a couple extra OKRs, which are really just derivatives of the first ones just to feel good about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you got to think about like how much time is the whole business going to waste on that OKR that just doesn't really matter. That's not going to move the needle. It's like even if folks are just dusting it off once a quarter for their QBR, it's still, I'm sure, hours and hours of people sitting in meetings listening about it. So I think you just got to make sure it's actually going to move the needle.
Have you ever seen OKRs just make an Irish exit partially through the year?
Yeah, at a previous company, I feel like we just realized like halfway through the year, like nobody's really taking these seriously, and they just kind of like walked off into the night, and nobody ever heard about them again.
It's happened to me multiple times, and I'm just like stepping back and trying to figure out why. Is it because no one was bought in at the start, or is it just because maybe it was just like too high level of goals, like hidden ARR of 100 million. And it's like, well, what else? That's kind of like a bland, non-descriptive, vague goal.
I'm trying to think. I was not like privy to the OKR process at that company, so I don't know exactly why, but I think you're onto something there. I think it's probably that people just weren't really bought in on them from the beginning, or halfway through the year, the leadership team realized maybe these aren't the most important things. Maybe we actually have other goals that are more important, and just decided it was too, I do think for some companies, if you're not ready and you're not going to invest in like having a robust process and actually making sure the org adopts it, then it doesn't make sense to spend time on it throughout the year if it's not really helping anybody.
But do you think that an org, like we're talking about startups here mostly, you kind of reserve the right to change course based on what's happening? Therefore, do you think it's okay to change the OKRs rather than just like completely sunset them or kill them off?
Absolutely. Yeah, especially in startups, anything could happen. Let's say you're in the middle of fundraising, you end up raising like a smaller or larger round than you originally anticipated. I think it's totally fine to then say, all right, we're going to revisit some of these goals. Actually, we think we can go a little bit faster.
Yeah.
Add another OKR because now we have more funding.
It's funny you say that. I feel like every time I've raised funding, we've changed the operating plan.
Yeah.
It tends to happen that way.
Yeah, makes sense.
Who in the org do you think should be responsible for reporting on OKRs?
I think ultimate responsibility probably sits with the CEO.
Yeah.
But for reporting, I would say typically, I feel like that fits really nicely into like chief of staff if you have one. If not, I could see it either being like CFO, COO, someone who's like in a bit of a more operational role.
I do feel though, if the CEO isn't pushing the pace on an OKR, then people don't really care. Like I've been the finance person at places before where I'm the one who's bringing it up over and over. But if the CEO isn't giving it airtime, then I don't know how far it carries.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I've been lucky at Sisense. I think our CEO is really bought in on the OKRs, so it does get a lot of airtime.
Yeah. Any last parting advice on OKRs?
Yeah, just plan early, plan often. I think trying to bake OKRs into like your day-to-day or at least your weekly cadence with your team is important, because you don't want to be that team that's just kind of dusting it off for the QBR and then realizing, oh, actually our KPIs aren't looking that great compared to what we set out to do because we haven't actually been focused there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also I think it reflects on the departmental leader if you're not talking about it either. Like you owe it to the rest of your team to bring it up at a regular cadence.
Yeah.
All right, Alyssa, I'm going to take you into what we call our long ass lightning round. So we're all human, but I ask every successful leader that comes on the podcast, give me something you've screwed up in your career. It could be this job or a different one.
Oh, that's a good one. I would have to say hiring. Just in general, I think hiring is one of the hardest things for a leader to do. And earlier in my career, I definitely, made multiple mistakes I think I've gotten some really good advice to hire fast, fire slow. I don't know if it's not like the most sensitive phrase. I do try to live by that now and really take my time and, think about the role and responsibilities, think about the qualities that's going to make someone successful in that role, and then take the time to really find the right person. I also think it gets a little bit easier as you get further along in your career and build a network. now I've been lucky to bring folks with me to Sisense from other companies. So it does get much easier once you have a known quantity. And then on the flip side, like if you do make a mistake, I would say just act, you got to act quickly, because I've learned that lesson too, where I've hired the wrong person and, let them sit in the seat for too long. And at the end of the day, it hurts. It not only hurts the organization, but I think it hurts that person too. So I think it's best to just be, I think Brene Brown says clear is kind, like just be clear and move on.
You brought up an excellent point, because I've had some people bring this up before, to hire slowly, take your time, but then fire fast, especially because it reflects on you as a leader too. Like other people are in the trenches or in your department saying, can you believe this person who's still around the department? Like, I can't believe the boss thinks this was a good idea. But what do you mean by it helps that person by kind of releasing them back into the wild?
Yeah, well, I think, not in every case, but I think most of the time it probably is going to be a talented person who will be able to go find something that's more well suited to their background. But I think more so from like time in the role, like if someone's in a role and they're just not performing or don't, just for some reason, like really don't fit with the corporate culture, the team culture, like I think that's just definitely got to be like an ego hit, like it's not going to be great for that person's mental well-being.
I was trying to think the other day, out of the people who didn't work out, was it like on a percentage basis, was it roughly more because like I knew at the very beginning very quickly they were the wrong person, or was it that the org grew to a level that just their skill set wasn't a great match for it anymore? I don't know if you have any thoughts that hit you when I say that though.
I've seen both. I think for me, it's more been the former, like hired someone into the role. And I mean, this is what I've learned too, is like how to ask better interview questions and really tease out someone's experience. But it's happened once or twice where I've hired someone and then, what they presented in the interview as their experience and background just like really didn't match up with then the work product, and like being able to hire, like if you're hiring someone into an accounting role and then they're really stumped on like how to perform a reconciliation, it's like, and you do some training and then like they still can't get it. It's like, then you can realize pretty quickly, like, okay, this probably isn't going to work out.
I've had some people blind me with, they're fast talking and they sound really smart and they should probably have a podcast. But do you believe in case studies and like written work product before you hire somebody?
It depends. I do think it can be helpful. Honestly, I have really mixed feelings about this, because as a hiring manager, I do feel like it can be helpful.
Oh yeah.
But then on the flip side, I mean, it does feel like you're asking for free labor. And then I also think it could almost like have some really good candidates kind of self-select out, because they're like, I'm not going to spend 8 hours building this model for you for free.
On the flip side, though, is it kind of a test in and of itself? Like, are you willing to do something? Like, it's less about the actual work, but more about like, did you say yes? Yeah,
I do. I think honestly, if I had all the funding in the world, I do think the companies should I've actually like earlier in my career, like I remember one company, I went to an interview and I didn't get the job and they sent me like a gift card for my time. And I've always remembered that. I'm like, that was like really nice of them.
Yeah.
Like, it did take time. So I'm like, in a perfect world, I do think I'm totally for the exam, but I think maybe there should be like a little compensation, because especially for like an FP&A exam and you're asking someone to build a model, that could be a good chunk of that person's time on the nights or weekends.
Yeah. I interviewed for a job years and years ago, and they actually paid me $1,000 to do the case study.
Wow.
Yeah. I ended up burning more than 20 hours on it. So like it wasn't a good ROI, but I was like, whoa, you're going to pay me to do this? This is a very nice gesture.
Yeah. I think stuff like that goes a long way with like building kind of like a corporate brand on the talent side.
I didn't get the job anyway. All right, Alyssa, if you could tell your younger self something knowing what you know today, what would you tell her?
Honestly, I would say everything's going to work out. Don't be so worried. Regret's a strong word, but when I was first out of college, I came from more like humble beginnings. So I've always been like a very frugal person, and right out of college, like had a job in New York City, but lived in the suburbs in New Jersey because I wanted to be able to save. And, in hindsight, I'm like, probably could have just, enjoyed my early 20s a little bit more and not worried so much about the future.
Yeah, live it up. Go out, buy the extra vodka sodas, get the apartment in New York. More of a technical question. Can you walk me through your finance software stack? What tools does your team use to get the job done?
Yeah, so we currently use Flowcast for our close management. And then we're actually just about to implement Mosaic for FP&A. We haven't had an FP&A tool to date, and it feels like it's about time.
You can hear my dog cheering. He's a fan of Mosaic. So sponsored by Walter, I guess. That's a good stack. What's the most recent tool you bought? Anything in the billing space, credit cards? So
billing, we actually took out Coupa and Expensify earlier this year and replaced them with Ramp.
Oh, nice.
I think that's been for us, that's been another big cost savings. And also it's nice to consolidate most of the spend on one platform.
Are you a fan of virtual credit cards?
Yeah, they're okay.
Sometimes I end up slicing out too many to people and then I have to delete them.
Yeah. I feel like they can I think all of those vendors would lead you to believe that it's like such an amazing product. But what I've found in experience is like most managers find them like a real pain to like manage and delegate.
They just want a physical one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually funny. All right. Last one I got for you. What's the craziest thing you've ever had someone try to expense?
Oh, this is a fun one. I've seen a lot of crazy things, but my favorite one is at a previous company, someone expensed, and this was a Philadelphia company. So if you know anything about Philly sports fans, this person expensed $1,500 in Mets tickets as a birthday present for their boss. And then the funny part was the boss was busy and couldn't even go to the game. I think we ended up having to like give them away to a customer. And we were like, yeah, you can't do that. You can't like suck up to your boss and buy him a birthday present. And then
with the company's money too. Like if you're going to suck up, go broke on your own dime.
Yeah.
That's a bizarre one.
Also like buying Mets tickets and you're a Philly company. It's like, no.
Yeah. Like absolutely rejected. Yeah. Philly sports fans are crazy. Didn't they have to like grease the stoplight poles with like butter so people didn't climb up them when they won the Super Bowl?
Yeah. And I don't even think it stopped everybody.
That's determination right there. That's the type of financial analyst I want to hire. Grit, determination. Cool. Alyssa, this has been a blast. Thanks so much. And loved your insights on BI, analytics, standing up a team, and OKRs. And we barely talked about annual planning, so I feel like we escaped this one.
Great. Mission accomplished. Thanks so much for having me on.
Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, LOL. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.